This whole idea of a divine calling, it's always kind of blown my mind.
Oh, yeah.
It feels huge, almost too big.
Right.
Like, how could anyone actually live up to that? But then when you shared that excerpt, the one about Isaiah and, like, his vision and getting called to service, man, that really hit me.
Interesting you should say that, because even when you think about it just within religion, like Isaiah's experience, it still kind of gets at something we all feel. That deep desire for our lives to matter, to have some meaning, even beyond like just getting through the day.
Exactly. And that's what's so cool about these deep dives. We
Yeah.
take something super old, like this Isaiah story,
Yeah.
and boom, it's relevant to us right here, right now.
For sure.
So for our listeners out there who maybe aren't Bible scholars, let's set the scene.
Okay, so the passage mentions this all went down during a really wild time in Israel's history, total political chaos, this feeling of like their whole moral compass was spinning. And if that wasn't enough, King Uzziah, who'd been in charge forever, dead.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, just imagine that uncertainty. Like nobody knew who was in charge anymore. This total power vacuum. You can totally see how it's like our own world sometimes, right?
Absolutely. That feeling when everything familiar, the rules, the leaders, your own life even, it all gets shaken up. Like, what's next? It's unsettling, but man, so many of us have been there.
Exactly. And that makes Isaiah's story even more powerful because right in the middle of all this craziness, this collective freak out, bam, he has this incredibly intense encounter with God.
And intense might not even cover it. He walks into the temple and
Oh, but it's not just seeing God on a throne, though that image by itself, wow.
right.
The text says the train of God's robe, it filled the entire temple.
Oh, wow.
Imagine that. This feeling of being completely surrounded, overwhelmed by this presence.
And then there is the seraphim, those like heavenly beings shouting, holy, holy, holy. It's more than just a word. It's this all-encompassing sound, emphasizing the absolute power, the total otherness of whoever they're praising.
Yeah. Everything about that vision, the sights, the sounds, it's all meant to make you feel awe, but also like really small. No wonder Isaiah's first reaction is, woe is me, I am undone.
It's like he suddenly sees all his own flaws, his humanity, compared to this incredible holiness. It's like that feeling when you accomplish something big and suddenly you're hyper aware of all the ways you fall short.
Totally. But it's not really just about like the flaws themselves, is it? It's more about being willing to admit them, to actually sit with that uncomfortable feeling and be like, okay, I don't have it all figured out.
Yeah.
That's usually how real growth happens,
Totally. And Isaiah really goes there. He's like, I am a man of unclean lips. Such a weird, specific detail.
Yeah.
But it gets at that feeling of being totally unworthy, like not even close to good enough compared to like this immense holiness.
Yeah. And that's where things get really interesting. Instead of just like running from that feeling, Isaiah kind of dives right in. He lets himself be totally transformed by it.
You're talking about the whole burning coal thing, right?
Yeah.
Okay, gotta admit, the first time I read that, I was like, whoa, that got intense fast.
Yeah.
But man, the symbolism is powerful.
Totally. Picture it. You've got this angel, right? And they take a burning coal straight from the altar, like the most sacred spot in the temple, and touch it to Isaiah's lips.
Whoa.
It's about purification. It's like those imperfections, those things that make him feel unworthy, they're literally being burned away,
Yeah.
making space for something totally new.
This radical act of grace,
Yeah.
like being cleansed, made whole. Okay, so after this intense encounter, this crazy emotional and spiritual roller coaster, what does Isaiah do?
Well, you'd think he'd want to peace out, right?
Yeah.
Like, okay, that's enough divine intervention for one lifetime.
Right.
But something changes in him.
So what does he do?
God asks the super simple but deep question, whom shall I send? And Isaiah, no hesitation, here I am, send me.
Wow. Talk about a turnaround. He goes from woe is me to send me
Yeah.
in like 5 minutes. What can we learn from that, even if we aren't exactly facing down, burning coals and angels?
It reminds us that admitting our flaws, our need to grow, it doesn't have to stop us in our tracks. Like, it can be the very thing that pushes us towards a bigger purpose. By facing his own imperfections head on, Isaiah is actually becoming ready to answer that call.
So you don't have to be great to start, but you got to start to be great, right?
Yes.
And Isaiah, even though he's scared, full of self-doubt at first, he starts. He says yes, even though he has no clue where it'll lead.
And that, yes, that's everything, because it's a choice we all got to make. It's not about if we'll be called, it's will we be listening? Will we be brave enough to answer?
And that's what's so wild about this whole calling thing, right? Like
Yeah.
there's something out there, some purpose, some path that's way bigger than just us. But how do we even start to find that?
That's where, like, what the speaker in this excerpt is saying gets really interesting. They make us ask ourselves, how are we listening for that call in our own lives? Like, are we actually making time to think, to connect with that voice inside, whatever that means for us?
Because it's so easy to get, like, totally sucked into the day-to-day. All the noise, the to-do lists. We miss those quieter whispers if we aren't paying attention.
For sure. And it's not just about finding the time, but like, are we actually ready to hear what that voice is saying? That takes honesty, being open to changing, to growing.
Like Isaiah's unclean lips, right?
Exactly.
It's about being real, about where we need to level up, to be more true to, like, who we want to be, what we care about.
And that leads to the big question, what are we going to do about it? Because answering a calling, whether it's making art or helping your community or even just facing a personal challenge, it takes action, getting out of your comfort zone.
It's easy to have the dream, to want something more, but actually getting the guts to take that first step, that's different.
And that's where Isaiah's story is so powerful. It's not about having it all figured out or being like perfectly ready. It's about saying yes, even when you're scared, even when you doubt yourself, trusting you'll figure it out as you go.
This has been an awesome deep dive. I mean, we've gone from this vision in an ancient temple to, like, real talk about finding your purpose today. So as we wrap up, any final thoughts for our listeners?
I'd say this. The most important journey we take after any calling is the one inside ourselves. So think about Isaiah and ask, what journey am I being called on? Not just out there in the world, but deep down inside me. That's where you find the courage to answer your own call to make a difference.
Boom. So good. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.